Okay, welcome to part 3 of 3. All right, so part 2 left off talking about some rebellions and some revolutions because, again, Jefferson called his election the Revolution of 1800, but there are so many revolutions. There are slave revolutions, slave rebellions that are going on. I also like to talk about these slave rebellions because it helps to demystify, or I'd say it helps to put some truth to that stereotype that enslaved people were happy. And it's like, no, they've been rebelling since their enslavement. So we continue with Jefferson's presidency. Again, he is elected. He's elected in 1800. And so one of the, I would say, biggest achievements per se of his term as president is the Louisiana Purchase. So in 1800, France acquired the Louisiana Territory, which is a huge territory. It's about 827,000 square miles of territory that is located west of the Mississippi River. Now, Jefferson sees France's acquisition of the Louisiana Territory a threat because he fears that the French could interfere with American commerce through the port of New Orleans. And so he strikes up a deal with Napoleon where he ends up getting the Louisiana Territory for a steal. Napoleon Bonaparte sells Jefferson the Louisiana Territory for about $15 million. Now, the importance of this is that overnight, as soon as we get this territory, the size of the United States instantly doubles. And it's very important because it ends the French president. It ends French presence in America. Now, once we have this territory, it's important to explore this territory. What is here, essentially? The goal of, Jefferson ends up sending out an expedition led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And it's like, why are they going out to explore? Well, they wanted to study plant life, they wanted to study the animal life and the geography of this area. Because what they really want to know is, how can we exploit this area economically? How can we make money from goods in this area, from products in this area? So in the spring of 1804, the Corps of Discovery sets out from St. Louis to explore this area. And so I've included a map in your PowerPoint presentation. This is a map created by Lewis Clark that shows what they're able to map out from this territory. So Jefferson will serve 2 terms in office, and afterwards we will have James Madison, who becomes president. However, in this time between the Louisiana Purchase and the end of this chapter, there's so much conflict. We'll be entering the War of 1812. Now, the War of 1812 is a 2-front war. It's between us and the British, and there's also this part of the war where we're fighting Native Americans. So this is where Tecumseh becomes very popular in your book. Tecumseh is a Shawnee chief, and he's known as the Prophet. He is a fierce warrior, but he's also a very compassionate leader. And he knows that while Native American tribes are diverse, because again, the Native American experience is not a monolith, and he understands this. But he also knows that in order to really successfully resist encroachment, it can only happen through a confederation of Native American tribes, like a union or a unification of Native American nations. He knew that in order to fight white encroachment, it would only happen through a united front. Tecumseh he refused to sign treaties that other leaders had signed. So that gives you a little bit of background. But what are some of the causes of the War of 1812, right? So here are some of the causes. So one, It's one thing we've already discussed earlier in this lecture, either part one or part two. It's called impressment. The British had resumed their policy of impressment, again, forcing Americans to serve in the Royal Navy. So it would force merchants and sailors to work in the Royal Navy. That is one of the causes of the War of 1812. Another cause was the Orders in Council. The United States was not able to trade with enemy nations. One was with Native Americans. No, Native Americans were not the problem. It's I would say a lot of Americans feel that the British are helping Native American tribes by encouraging them to raid towns and by trading with them. And so this is one of the causes. A lot of people will say, look, we got to get the British because they're encouraging Native Americans to attack us and they're making them stronger by trading with them. So that is another cause. And the last cause that I will discuss are war hawks. You have a lot of people who are like more gung-ho for war. A lot of the congressmen who are mainly from the South and from the West, especially people such as Henry Clay, they will encourage war. Now, the Battle of Tippecanoe, which actually occurs in 1811, becomes a rallying cry for a lot of war hawks because they are angered by British support of Western Native American nations. And so William Henry Harrison, who we'll hear about a little later in some chapters to go, William Henry Harrison launches a preemptive strike at Prophetstown. So Prophetstown was a Native American encampment. So he wants to launch a strike against Native Americans at this encampment.